Dang it. Oh, no. Come on in. Because now it's time to learn, to cook, to taste. Hello and welcome to Taste, the cooking podcast where every episode dives deep into a different food. I'm your host, Cody Reiss, and the goal of this podcast is to try to help you become a more intuitive, improvisational cook. The hope is to learn as much as we can about the challenges, inflection points, and thought processes behind different foods, so that as you listen to more and more episodes, you kind of develop a Rolodex of different foods you feel more comfortable with. Our guest today is Lucas Sin, and we're going to be talking about fried rice, and the episode is pretty long, but I found it absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed listening to him talk about food, and I think you will too. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Lucas. I asked you, Lucas, to pick a food, and you chose fried rice. Why did you choose fried rice?
Well, golden fried rice was one of the first recipes that it's an important recipe to me because I do think it's a simple preparation of a simple dish that can allow anybody to make one of the best tasting things in the universe. And from that golden fried rice, I've been studying fried rice for a long time. I'm currently working on a book about chaan, which is the Hong Kong diner. And fried rices are a big part of the lunch and dinner menu. And so actually, in preparation for this episode, I wrote a chapter in my book about fried rice.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
But yeah, so fried rice is one of those things that's like, well, to put it more simply, I think the food that I'm most interested in as a chef is the simplest food because I think you can be so serious about all the details and you don't necessarily need to elevate the simple food, but in simple food with a careful attention to detail, you can make some of the best things in the universe that you can parse out. You know, when you eat it, you're like, oh, this is why it's good. This element is good because they did this and they made these decisions and so on and so forth. So it's a really good sort of topic for a conversation.
I love that. That's awesome. Do you have early memories of fried rice in your life, or like, is it sentimental to you beyond that?
I've been told that when I was in kindergarten, the first show and tell, I had brought fried rice demo. So it's one of those things where, so my dad basically is like an undercover professional chef insofar as he's just always wanted to be a chef, I think, but has thought better and had a real career in the real industry. But he would like arm me throughout my childhood with the tools and the stories required to become a chef in his stead. And it started early in kindergarten. I remember like a pink lunchbox, like a bento box that had like dividers for the different components of your like mini tiny lunch. And then I remember there being like a little scrambled egg and like cooked rice and then, you know, I think this is in Canada, right? So at this point in my time. And so I remember bringing it to school, opening up and saying, oh, my favorite food is fried rice. And this is how you make it. You just like mix everything together. You can make anything. And that sort of thing. That's one memory. Another childhood memory and a really important one is especially the golden fried rice idea. Comes from, I first learned about in a Japanese anime about Chinese cooking.
Are you talking about Food Wars?
No, this is before Food Wars. This is Chukai Chiban, which I think translates to like number one in China. But the story overall is like a teenage boy conquers the Chinese culinary scene in like ancient dynastic times by battling people. And in the first episode, the reason why people believe he has real talent is because he makes fried rice. So he's going up against like a royal cook. The cook is making the most complicated dish of all time. And he presents to the emperor this bowl of rice that is just, he presents his fried rice in a cloche. And he opens it, and then a beam of light comes down from heaven. And it's like, oh, what's going on? It's like so aromatic. And they eat it. It's like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever had. And the beauty of that dish, obviously, is supposedly there's nothing in that dish except for eggs and rice. And so, again, it's like a very, very simple thing. But between that and like the mixing, and you can do whatever you want, the kindergarten customization fried rice can be whatever you'd like it to be kind of thing. I think I stumbled upon a perfect food.
Wow, I love that. It's just amazing. Do you think of fried rice, like, is it comfort food for you? Is it a whole meal for you? Like, how does it show up in your life? Like maybe at home, I guess.
Yeah. So fried rice it's a perfect leftover meal, obviously. It's a perfect no recipe because you can use whatever you have on hand as long as you have rice to make fried rice. That's one. The other way it kind of shows up often for me is as a base, as a sort of luxurious version of white rice. So especially in the type of restaurant that I'm currently studying, the chaan teng, you'll see fried rice as a luxurious option over which sauce or a stir fry might go. So normally it might be like baked pork chop rice over white rice, but then you can ask for them to make it with egg fried rice instead, and then you have a little bit more extra something inside of in your life. Last night for dinner, we were just doing tomato, eggs, and a stir fry and a vegetable and something like this. And instead of just serving white rice with it, it was a soy sauce fried rice, and very, very simple, but just like elevate it a little bit. That's these days is how I've been really enjoying fried rice. Fried rice is a component of a meal instead of just like a whole meal in and of itself.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. I just had fried rice last night and I was like, whoa.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like fried rice is a lot of rice. It's like primarily rice. And so it's not the most, I don't know, it's pretty carb heavy, and it's not the type of thing you want to eat in the middle of your day all the time.
Totally. Yeah. It destroys you. Okay. Can you give me like a general description of your ideal fried rice?
Yeah.
Like tastes, textures, like the ratio of ingredients, how many ingredients there are, just like general, like platonic.
Yeah. So I think fried rice in general is about taste and texture, right? So food in general is about taste and texture. We'll start with the texture first, because I think that's the most important thing with fried rice. Is the texture in the fried rice comes from the texture of the rice itself primarily. You're looking for something, the Chinese word for this is li li fen ming, or lup lup fen ming. So you want every single grain of rice to be distinct, to be individual, right? The way you see that happen in the wok is you'll see the rice separate from a clump, and it'll start like jumping and like bouncing on its own inside of the wok. That individual distinct grain is the most important thing for fried rice. Now, that usually a lot of people take this to mean that the fried rice needs to be dry. In a sense, it needs to be dry, because when you bite into each individual grain of rice, there should be moisture. There should be like a hint of stickiness in the middle part of the rice, and the inside should give you a little bit of bite, kind of like al dente, but not as hard, like a little bit softer than al dente. That balance of sort of glutinousness with that individual distinct texture, that's the perfect texture for the rice. It's like when people talk about sushi, they say actually sushi is mostly about the rice. It's like, yes, I think also fried rice, yes, you can have luxurious toppings, you can have scallops, you can do chao siu, you can do whatever vegetables, all these things, but the base, the foundation is manipulating the texture of that rice. And I think we can spend most of this podcast just talking about how to achieve that texture in that rice and what type of rice to use and so on and so forth. So that's the main texture component.
That's amazing.
The taste blows everything wide open. You can honestly incorporate almost any flavor that you can think of inside of this fried rice, as long as you're not compromising that texture. Now, beyond the fanciful sort of like sky high big flavors that we're talking about, I think one of the most critical components to 99% of fried rices in terms of flavor is the egg. And I think there are interesting manipulations of that egg to produce either sort of like a fresh, light, eggy aroma, or something that's a little bit more deeper and brown and caramelized, like the crispy edges of like a properly fried egg that you can jump and play in between. And so eggs, I don't think, are necessary for fried rice, but they are a critical component to many, 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 many fried rices. So I think that's the base flavor, is like sort of this egg thing. And then the other main flavors inside of it need to be some type of aromatic. And by aromatic, in the Chinese sense or in the Asian sense, usually it bounces somewhere in between the garlic, ginger, and scallion, onion type of realm. That is those aromatics are foundational because of the base for other flavors to play around. And then after that, it's your proteins of choice, your vegetables of choice, and so on and so forth. But I think all of that is optional. And the most basic version of a fried rice would honestly just be rice and eggs and some sort of like aromatic to anchor that basic, but already cohesive fried rice flavor profile.
Wow. I have to say, I think I could listen to you talk about food all day. I was like, literally, found myself like leaning in on my seat, like, what's he going to say next? And I think like, I feel like I have to pause, because like, I feel like the way you just talked about that was so incredibly like thoughtful and like detail, fine point, like focused. And I'm curious, like when you were describing the ideal texture of the single grain of rice, I feel like that kind of attention to detail, and it's almost like a mindfulness exercise to be like that aware of something that you're eating.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such an important part of becoming good at cooking, is like kind of paying attention in the moment. And I kind of actually just want to know at this point, like how you got so knowledgeable about food, and then also how did you develop the skill of being of like observation when it comes to like eating and cooking?
I think food is such a fascinating thing because it's one of those things that everybody is in touch with. Most of us interact with food at least 3 times a day. And in so doing, it's a great platform to discuss other things. It's a great lens through which to discuss more abstract ideas or to bring in your own perspective about the world into the discussion of food. So all of this is to say that I think food is a great way to talk in an interdisciplinary way. It seems to me to really marry the science side of things, the art side of things, the cultural side of things, the history side of things, but also like the home, the home economics side of things, like the home kitchen management side of things, and economics and business operations and all these things. It's just whatever corner of the world you come from, whatever you're interested in, whatever your mode is through which you see the world, you can apply it to food. And so it seems like a very easy thing to talk about, especially if we try to complicate the discussion and be a little bit more critical about the things that we're eating. I would say that that's probably something that my dad encouraged me to do. Like when we were growing up, we would eat even the simplest things at home or in restaurants and things. And we'd say, oh, this tastes good. And then he would ask, why does it taste good? Is it the guy that made it? Is it the situation? Is it that the temperature in the room is perfect? Or are you feeling happy? Or like, do you think this ingredient is local or it comes from this particular place or something like this? And so that kind of got that conversation going. The other thing is like, the more you cook, the better you are at talking about food because you understand the process behind it. In Hong Kong and in Shanghai, where I am currently, you do notice a big gulf between the sort of like foodies who are only consumers and the foodies who have a little bit like a cooking experience, even like at the amateur home level, because people who aren't engaged with the creation of the food oftentimes fail to notice these little details that I think make the conversation about food so exciting, right? It doesn't always have to be a chef bro, I'm going to make the perfect fried rice kind of approach. But it could be like, like if we pay a little bit of attention, the right amount of attention to this stuff, we can make our life like a little bit better, a little bit more delicious.
Totally.
And that applies, in my opinion, to the simplest of foods because those are the foods that we interact with on the most frequent basis. Like I wouldn't go into this level of detail talking about something that I would only eat one time in my life. But if it's something like fried rice or in the case of this book, like scrambled eggs or soup, like things that we just constantly are making in Hong Kong, then that stuff requires and asks for a higher level of attention to detail.
Totally. Yeah. I really resonate with a lot of that and like totally agree with what you're saying about like food is just such a wonderful lens to look at the world. And I find like my motivation is like travel and pleasure and like regional American food. And there's so many different ways into it. Yeah, that was really beautiful. Okay, thank you for answering that. Let's dive back into fried rice. I guess my instinct is to kind of like have you run me through making maybe like the base fried rice, or you had mentioned golden fried rice. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, what that is?
So I think, in my opinion, golden fried rice, once you make it once, you totally understand why it is my go-to fried rice. It's like the base fried rice. It is simultaneously a no-fail version of fried rice and like the ideal, like best possible. I don't know how I could do any better than this type of fried rice. Okay. And to cut to the chase, the secret for golden fried rice is you take your eggs and you separate your eggs to the egg yolks and the egg whites, and you mix your egg yolks into your rice before you stir fry it, and the egg whites are separate. And I should clarify that you're mixing your egg yolks into cooked rice, usually overnight rice.
I'm going to pause you. I think we should start from the very beginning of the process.
We should start from yeah.
So I think like, let's go through, I think it sounds like in your mind, golden fried rice is the ideal fried rice. So maybe that seems like a good thing to walk through. And like, let's go from like, you're stepping in the kitchen, like, and you've decided you're going to make golden fried rice through the bite, like hits your mouth. Yeah. And along the way, like I'll probably probe us to dive a little deeper into the rice, the fat, the pan, the egg, etc.
Okay.
So you step into the kitchen.
Okay. So you step in the kitchen and you're about to make fried rice. The first thing you have to think about is rice. The question is that rice either has to be cooked or you already have it in your fridge.
Right.
Now, let's start with, usually this is how it happens, is that you have some sort of like overnight rice. And most recipes online, most people will tell you that overnight rice is kind of the ideal rice to stir fry with. There's a lot of reasons for that, and it's true. It might not be ideal, but it is probably the best thing that you have. The enemy to fried rice is stickiness and moisture. Not to sort of recall your nightmare from yesterday, but probably what happened is usually a bad fried rice is just you get these clumps of rice, and for whatever reason they're sticking together, the flavors are not melding, and the more you cook it, the stickier it gets. And that stickiness usually comes from too much surface moisture on each grain of the rice. And that moisture on the surface of that rice grain interacts with the starch in a way that makes it gluey. And so as you're heating it, you're introducing, the temperature is going up, the starch continues to swell, and as it touches other starch from other grains of rice, it then kind of almost basically binds together, and it becomes one gluey mass. And so the way to counteract this basically is to ensure that the surface of that rice is as dry as possible. Now, if you're going to leave it overnight, as it cools down, surface moisture evaporates. That's one. And the other thing is that you get this thing called starch retrogradation, which is one of the most important parts of starch cookery, actually, is not only cooking it, but letting it cool slightly and settle so that the surface of each of those starch granules sets and it recrystallizes in the sense that it almost seals itself in. Right. So when it opens up as it's cooking, it has all this potential to be sticky. As you let it cool a little bit, it will settle, and it'll be much less likely to stick. And so through this cooling process and this evaporation process, you kind of achieve this ideal fried rice, textured overnight rice. I think this is a great hack, and it also is convenient because that's when most people make fried rice, is they have leftovers. They'll bring a bunch of things together. You'll have the rice around. Yeah.
In what you're talking about, like, I just made a rice cooker full of rice. When it's done cooking, I like spread it out and let it cool in the fridge. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say you've made a full pot of rice for your regular meals or that sort of thing, and as you're eating it for your regular meal, it's not as sticky. It's not totally sticky, right? Like if your rice was overcooked and mushy in the first place, there's no saving it. But if it was cooked properly and you put it over a tray, you let it steam off a little bit before you put it into the fridge, 12 hours later, you would have perfect overnight rice for fried rice.
Got it.
Now, Kenji also has written so much about fried rice, and he says that the rice that is spread out on a tray, even when it's fresh and blown directly with a fan to encourage that evaporation and that sort of like starch sealing itself that I was talking about, is also a great option. I think, though, that if you look at a Chinese restaurant, like a proper Cantonese stir-fry restaurant that prizes their fried rice, they more often than not are using fresh rice. And the reason for this is because, especially to the East Asian customer, we can really tell when rice has that sort of like rice aroma. It's something that people are looking for. And you can imagine that rice left in a fridge, usually uncovered overnight, is less aromatic than fresh rice out of a steamer. Now, it's important that when you're cooking with fresh rice, that rice is genuinely steamed. For me, I have been unable to create a great fried rice when that rice is cooked in a pot. The reason obviously is because of the amount of moisture that's on it and how the heat is entering those grains of rice. And so when you're steaming it, the basic procedure inside of a proper Cantonese dim sum restaurant, for example, would be to take rice, put it at the correct rice to water ratio, which is usually something like 1:1 or 1:1.1, steam the whole thing inside of a steamer until it's cooked, take it out, fan it open a little bit, and then just cook with it hot. And that process, you're not introducing too much steam. They've dialed in the ratio to the rice to the water. The rice itself has absorbed the proper amount of water. As they're cooking it, the heat from the wok and the heat from the air and the coolness of the air and all these things are going to help it evaporate. It's already at the right temperature. And more importantly, you're capturing all of that aromatic rice flavor because it's straight from the steamer into the wok, right? Speaking of fried rice, you know about the Uncle Roger thing? Do you remember how he got
I
he
don't
went
think so.
viral originally was for making fun of a British chef who was making fried rice. And in that viral video, this is how Uncle Rogers built much of his fortune, is on this fried rice thing. And in that video, the chef that he's commenting on boils rice the way they boil pasta, like an excessive amount of water. Boils the rice. After it's cooked, she drains it all out and then rinses it with cold water from a tap, which is objectively insane.
Yeah.
But I've seen that happen at more than one proper Cantonese dim sum restaurant, and it is, if you kind of think about it from, I suppose, a food science perspective or like a screwed up chef kind of perspective, like that's kind of actually acceptable way to get the right texture of fried
It's like
rice.
kind of like a fucked up way to like do what you've been talking about the whole time.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
cool
Right. You're
in,
like
yeah,
rinsing off the surface starch. As long as she like kind of dries it out and she really tries to get that water out,
Yeah.
it would actually be perfect rice to fry with. And there are a lot of Western restaurants in New York where friends of mine have worked, where for family meal they have to make rice quickly and they'll boil rice like pasta, drain it out, and just eat it like that.
Totally.
When you're not looking for the most specific thing, but you can achieve that sort of texture. It's doable. It's not a good way to do it, but it's doable. But anyway, back to
So you described like kind of restaurant ideal, like in a steamer oven kind of vibes. Like,
Yes.
what about at home? Like, would like I have a zojirushi. Like, is that can I achieve that same thing as a zojirushi, or like?
Yeah. So if you're cooking it in a zojirushi or in a rice cooker, you're not technically steaming it. In general, rice cookers are the best ways to cook rice for most people at home because they're so simple. And the rice cooker is intelligent enough to manage the temperature and manage the amount of moisture inside of that pot to create pretty ideal rice. If I'm going to be making fried rice, I tend to add a little bit less water than the amount of rice I have to the rice cooker, just because I do want it a little bit drier. So it's something like 1 to 0.8 or 0.9 maybe. And also the other things, like when you're washing, by the way, rice has to be washed. It, like 100% of the time basically has to be washed, unless you're making mochi or something. You're rinsing not the bugs and the dirt on it, but you're rinsing the surface starch on it. Again, the less surface starch, the less likelihood that it's going to be sticky, even when you're just eating it alone and you're not making fried rice. So I insist that it needs to be washed at least sort of like 2-3 times, usually until it's clear. And when you're draining that off, because you're probably washing your rice inside of the same pot that you're cooking it in, you're never going to get it totally dry. And so when you're adding extra water for the cook, you want to add a little bit less to account for the amount of water that's still inside of the pot.
That's a great tip. I love that. So would you, let's say you're making your rice in your rice cooker, you've done like a little bit less water than you normally would. The rice is done. Is that rice like dry enough that you would make fried rice with it hot, or would you still probably?
Yeah, you could go directly into making it hot. What I would do is like, you're popping open your rice cooker and then you would kind of use your rice paddle to fan it out a little, to like stir it up a little, to encourage a little bit of that immediate initial evaporation. You want some of that evaporation. You want to see that it almost wants to become individually distinct before you add it to your wok. Of course, the best thing to do is maybe to like take it out and like kind of fan it out on a plate or a sheet tray or something, just to let that evaporation happen. Now, the other way to really get properly steamed rice that is the right texture is actually to parboil it and then steam it. So one thing that, like pasta, you would have a pot of water, add your rice, you would boil it, you would cook it for maybe like 5 minutes or so, just to get that, just until you can see that the grains of rice have swollen and have started to absorb that moisture, but they're not fully cooked. After that, you drain it all out, drain all of it until the rice is dry, but all the moisture is absorbed into the rice grains itself. And then you would put that into a steamer. Let's say you have a bamboo steamer or whatever steamer you're using, and usually laden with some type of cloth to stop it from falling out the bottom of the steamer. And then you would literally steam it. A lot of people, when they say steamed rice, they're actually talking about like rice cooker cooked rice, which is not steaming. But that's in my opinion, the easiest way to deal with steamed rice at home, because you don't have to measure how much water you have. When you're steaming, and say inside of a pan, if you added too much water, the rice is going to absorb all of this water. But in this case, you're just trying to control the amount of water that the grain are absorbing in the parboiling process. So when you're steaming it dry, so to speak.
Right. That's interesting. Would you use like a little metal steamer basket in the bottom of your like?
Usually, in general, in terms of steaming, I find the easiest way to steam is a bamboo basket. that sits over a wok, or some sort of saucepan that has a little bit curved edges, because that bamboo steamer can kind of fit in any, as long as it's a little bit smaller than the diameter of your pan, it can be a little bit, it can just sit on top of something. And those are the easiest things to manipulate. Yeah.
Cool. So there's making rice at home, which we've just got a bunch of like techniques on. Last night, I had leftover rice from Thai food. And I feel like a lot of people at home are probably have like half a container of takeout rice, and they're like, I'm going to make fried rice.
Yeah.
How would you go about, do you have any considerations of like, leaving the box open after you open it, leaving it open in the fridge so it dries out? Like, how do you treat like takeout rice so that the next day it'll be good to use for fried rice?
First of all, that takeout rice is perfect because that's the rice that the restaurant's going to be using if you were to order fried rice from them the next day.
Right.
Second is that if that fried rice, if that rice comes to you in those like Chinese takeout containers, the paper ones, those tend to trap a lot of moisture. And so I would want to take them out and put it inside of one of my own Tupperwares or deli containers or something like that, just to make sure that the rice is not too heavy. It's not sinking upon itself and it doesn't get gluey, just to make sure it doesn't get gluey on the bottom. So I think jasmine rice is great. And in my opinion, I think ideal fried rice is made from jasmine rice. In order of ease, but in reverse order of rice fragrance, it goes something like basmati and other long grain varieties like that. And then jasmine, kind of the medium grain varieties. And then the short grain to the very, very short grain, such as koshihikari down to like sushi rice.
Now, can you, the bottom was most fragrant, but most difficult?
Yeah. It goes in order of ease of frying.
Okay.
Which is the reverse order of like rice aroma.
Okay, great. So more aroma is in the shorter grains.
Yeah. More aroma and more like kind of interesting textures kind of. So like Eric, for example, Eric Z will insist that the only good fried rice is made with short grain rice because he likes an individual chew. He likes a little bit of pop of that texture. I would argue that that type of fried rice is quite difficult to achieve for most people. To get a nice individually distinct textured fried rice from that short grain rice, it's kind of difficult to achieve. And so the medium grain rice like jasmine is kind of like a happy in between. Another really interesting thing you can do is you can mix rices. So I know a guy who runs a great fried rice themed chain restaurant here in China, and he uses a mix actually of I think it's 25% basmati, 75% short grain. So to help, that basmati helps break up some of that texture and that sort of thing.
Cool.
Like jasmine short grain combo 50-50 could also be great.
Right. So, I used the takeout rice yesterday and that is what stuck. Do you think the way that I stored it made it collected extra moisture?
Right. Yeah. So you can imagine what happened was at the restaurant, it's coming out of a rice cooker. It's steaming hot. They're packing it into the thing, into the takeout container. And as that takeout container is being sent to you, as you're eating your food, as it's stored inside of the fridge, the bottom is just sinking into itself and it's getting gluier and gluier. But most importantly, because it was packed hot, there's no opportunity for that initial surface moisture to evaporate. And so your job may be, if you're going to make fried rice with it, is to transfer it to another container to make sure that that didn't happen and to maybe remove some of those clumps before you're cooking. Another thing that can be very, very helpful if you don't do this step is prior to cooking your fried rice, you take your fried rice out and you break out some of those clumps with your fingers in a bowl or something.
I put it was basically a half circle and I put the whole, it was like, I could bang it against a wall and I basically like chopped it up.
But if you can break it up with your fingers, then you know that it wants to come apart. Right.
Okay,
and
cool.
I think this is perhaps a good segue into the golden fried rice thing because in my opinion, maybe one of the ideal ways of making fried rice, golden fried rice, the initial step is to break apart the grains of rice inside of a bowl until they're distinct, and then you're adding your egg yolks. I think, roughly speaking, you can get away with 1 American egg yolk to anywhere between 1 and 2 cups of rice.
Okay, cooked rice. Yeah.
The idea is what you're looking for is as you're mixing the egg yolks into this cooked, chilled overnight rice, the egg yolk is going to coat every single grain of rice. What you'll see after you've mixed it thoroughly is a pale yellow color. And what's happening is because the egg yolk coats every single grain of rice, you get 2 things. One is that you get the texture that we're looking for when you're cooking it. The fat in that egg yolk and the proteins in that egg yolk help like protect each grain of rice and kind of like is a coating around that surface starch that would normally cause fried rice to stick to each other. With this, you get impossibly easy individual grains of rice. As you're cooking it, you imagine like tiny, tiny thin layers of scrambled egg yolk around each single grain of rice. That's why they're like protected and perfect, right?
I am imagining that.
And the second thing you get is just beautiful egg yolk aroma. Like all of the flavor in the egg is in that egg yolk, that egginess, that little bit of char. We can talk about wok hei a little bit later, but that magical smell of like well cooked egg happens because you're ensuring that every single rice gets the same amount of egg, and it's just the good parts of that egg yolk.
Wow. I'm wondering, like, for some reason, some part of me is like, this is cheating.
Yeah.
But
I remember when I put this out to Bon App, Chris Morocco, head of a Bon App recipe development or something, fact check me later. But he called and he sent me an email. Like he didn't know, like we'd never met each other. He sent me an email. He was like, dude, this is like cheating. And he's like, also, how do you get egg whites not to stick in your pan? Like, I don't know, man. This is just like how Chinese people do it.
Wow. So maybe it's good. Cause like, I guess like I'm thinking about someone listening to this and being like, I want to make fried rice not that way, but I guess maybe there's no reason to.
There's no reason not to. If you're not using egg, maybe. The other thing is, when you get into the upper echelons of fried rice making, you might argue that there are certain ingredients that you're using that you want that you want as the anchor for the flavor of your fried rice. And so the egg gets in the way of it. A great example is like a lot of Cantonese fried rices actually are known and seen as white fried rices. So they don't have egg in it. But if they do have egg, it would just be the egg white. And these are normally things like fried rice with salted fish or fried rice with beef or choy sam or that type of thing where you want kind of like a cleaner flavor profile without any of that toastiness. Then you would like omit the yolks.
What about like if you wanted to make like put like soy sauce in it, or you wanted to put like kimchi in it? Like does the egg surrounding it inhibit some sort of like flavor absorption properties?
I don't
of
think
the
so.
rice?
As like the way I think about it is, if I were to scramble an egg, the regular way of adding eggs to fried rice, either by starting the egg scramble and then adding rice to it, or pushing the rice aside and scrambling the egg on the side. Either way, if you were to add eggs to your fried rice, there is no really downside to making it golden. Maybe actually the one thing is that you will need an extra bowl and you have to get your hands dirty to mix the egg yolks into the rice. But the other thing is, by the way, you could mix the egg yolks into the rice and like keep in the fridge that way. And then whenever you need fried rice, you can bring it out. But you normally have to do this after the rice is chilled, not when the rice is fresh, because number one, it's too hot to handle when it comes straight out of the rice pot. The second is you don't want that egg yolk to cook until it hits the pan.
To Taste is brought to you by my Substack, which is also called To Taste. You can find it online on Substack. And if you like this podcast, you might also like my stories about food and travel that I write on there. And I would be just absolutely over the moon if you checked it out. I write 2 pieces a month, and for paying subscribers every month, I publish a downloadable custom Google map for a different part of the country and the world. Anyways, check it out if that sounds interesting, and let's get back to our conversation with Lucas.
So my instinct would be to talk next about the pan. Does that seem to make sense?
Yes.
Because I have a wok, but it's in my storage, and I'm too afraid to start using it. And so I used a cast iron pan. That could have been part of my trouble because I don't think my cast iron is particularly well seasoned. But if someone at home doesn't have a wok, doesn't feel comfortable using a wok, what kind of pan should they be grabbing for?
At home, let me tell you why the wok is perfect. The wok is perfect for making fried rice because of its material and size. The size is the main thing that it's hard to substitute when you're using a non-wok. The size and the shape, right? The woks are designed for every single purpose in the kitchen, but they're really, really good at stir fries. That bottom shape allows the rice to jump, right? To saute, to mix very easily. But the material is one of the more important things because most of these woks are carbon steel. Carbon steel, like cast iron, heats up and then holds that heat really, really well, despite how thin it is. And that is the main thing that you're looking for. Now, there are 2 things. if you're looking for wok hei, which some people say is elusive in the home kitchen, in my opinion, it just depends on what type of stove you have. If you have a
Can you
gas,
describe wok hei for someone
Yeah.
at home that might not know what that is?
wok hei oftentimes is translated as the aroma of the wok or the spirit of the wok. But basically, it's this flavor that you get in a lot of stir-fry dishes where it feels just a touch singed, a little bit nutty, but just overall magical. Like people describe it as a sort of like je ne sais quoi about Chinese food. And it really is just a combination of the Maillard reaction and caramelization with the right amount of moisture control. And so this feeling basically from cooking at very, very high temperatures inside of a wok. Some people say you can cook in a wok. Well, P.F. Chang says they cook in a wok up till 700 degrees in the promotional video, but which is probably true to some extent. But the woks get very, very hot because they're sitting on specific wok stoves that are basically like jet engines. And that high heat plus that cast iron plus the quick movement and the short cooking times allows for food to basically singe, sear as it's touching the wok, and then as it's being tossed up into the air, it stops cooking, and when it hits the wok again, it starts cooking. So it's starting and cooking, stopping, starting, stopping. A lot of evaporation is happening, and so you get this like nice tiny edges of caramelization and like char on every single part of your stir fry. That's what wok hei is, and that's kind of where it comes from. Now, I think the wrong way to think about wok hei is to say wok hei is the most important thing about Chinese food. If I can't get wok hei, I shouldn't make Chinese food at home. Most people who have regular stoves, especially if you have an electric or induction stove, you're not going to be getting any type of wok hei. If you're really interested in it, Kenji asks for you to torch your food as you're cooking it. I think holding a torch in one hand and like tossing on the other hand is like kind of a difficult thing to do. So the more sort of prudent thing perhaps is to say wok hei is a special magical ingredient that Chinese restaurants have that I don't have. And so I'm just going to settle with a delicious stir fry that doesn't have this like element. That said, in order to get high heat, I think cast iron is a great way to do it if you don't have a wok. Carbon steel skillets are my favorite because they do get as hot as a cast iron, but they're easier to manipulate. They're a little bit lighter. And if you can get a cast iron pan a carbon steel pan that has sloped edges, it functions in a way like a flat bottom wok. And in my tiny New York apartment, that's what I was using. Another actually crazy idea is to use something like a stainless steel pot, like the pot that you boil your pasta in, because yes, it doesn't get as hot as a carbon steel or cast iron pan, but if you were to heat it up on your stove and your stir fry, instead of picking up and tossing it, was just going crazy with a wooden spatula inside and up on those high walls, you would be manipulating the food and you would have so much freedom to mix everything around without like spilling anywhere. So for like slightly bigger than 2-person stir fries in a tiny New York apartment, I would do it in my pasta pot and just like go crazy with your wood spatula and just like mix.
Interesting. Okay, cool. I love that. So let's say you've got your pasta pot or you've got your cast iron, or if you're lucky, or your carbon steel, or you've got your wok. Like, do you get it ripping before you put anything in?
Yeah. So the Chinese approach to it in a wok is, it's called long yao. So in a proper restaurant, what would happen is they would heat up the wok until the wok itself is smoking, and then they would add cold oil, as in room temperature oil, and that oil would basically bring the temperature down just enough that that's the perfect temperature for cooking. It's just a easy kind of professional chef hack. More proper restaurants might add a huge amount of oil and then coat the inside and then pour that oil out, and the residual oil is what they would cook with, or maybe they would add a little bit more. That's the typical professional Chinese chef approach. At home, I think what you should be doing is a similar thing of heating your pan up in and of itself, get it hot. If it's cast iron or carbon steel, you want to see it smoking, add that oil, coat, and then start cooking.
Cool. Okay. First thing in is what?
So if we're not going the golden fried rice route, in my opinion, the easiest thing, actually, the first thing that you should be making sure that you're cooking is the toppings, if the toppings are raw. So by toppings, I mean your meats, your vegetables, whatever else you're adding in that's not kind of a seasoning or a sauce. First, in terms of toppings, great toppings include things like shrimp, things like char siu, diced kind of small, ham, sausage, spam, all those sort of like flavorful meat proteins kind of thing. If you have something from takeout, you have something that's already cooked, all you have to do is dice it small. You're dicing it small so that you can eat fried rice with a spoon and it can all go in with the rice at the same time. Right. That's that. If it's raw, you have to cook it into your mouth. Yeah. If that stuff is raw, you have to make sure it's cooked. You shouldn't really be adding you should not assume that ingredients will dramatically change in terms of cookedness if you just add it to the rice, because they're being insulated by the rice. It's not going to cook from raw to cooked. So you have to make sure that's cooked.
Will it go from refrigerator cold to hot?
Warm, or I actually think they will get warm, but they won't cook. So if I had, let's say, refrigerated chao siu, I'll just add it to the rice directly later on in the cooking process, and usually it comes out okay. But yeah, so you're cooking all of that stuff, and you're kind of also building a little bit of fond, or sort of like, you know, protein flavor inside of your pan. So you just want to heat that up, get it nice and warm, nice and hot, take it out, and then cook your vegetables also. And some of the moisture that comes off of that vegetable will help pick up some of that fond and pick up some of that flavor. Vegetables, I think, if you want them to be more cooked, let's say you have Chinese broccoli and you're dicing it, and you would add that at this stage. However, if you were adding something like, let's say, cherry tomatoes, and tomatoes are very, very wet, you have to think about whether you want to extract that moisture in the cooking process, or you want to keep them relatively raw and add them in a little bit later. Either way, I think things like onions, garlic, and ginger need to go in at this stage of stir-frying all of that stuff, and then taking all of it out. So you're stir-frying your toppings, have that all cooked or ready to go. If they're not, put them on the side. If you're just doing egg fried rice, you skip all this stuff.
Okay, sweet. So you cooked your meat. Let's say I crisped up some ham cubes. I took them out, and then maybe I added more oil, and I added in my vegetables. I cook those. You would also cook the aromatics at this stage. Is that what I heard you say? Yeah. So maybe if you're cooking, would you start, let's just walk through, like, let's say you're using Chinese broccoli.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I need to take all this back.
Okay.
So so you're right. The aromatics you don't actually do at this stage. The garlic, ginger, and scallions. So you do so all your proteins are cooked. And then for the vegetables, any vegetables like Chinese broccoli, or substantial vegetables, you want to make sure that those are cooked also, and then you take them out. And then the next stage after that is not the aromatics, but actually the egg.
The egg. Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, wow. So would you, at this point, I would be worried about stickage in my brain. I'd be worried about there's little leftover caramelized bits that are going to make it so my egg sticks to the pan. Yes. Is that something you're worried about, or no?
Yes, I'm worried about that. So, this is like the cooking of your toppings is kind of the preparation stage. And then the main stir fry, just know that once it starts, it's not going to stop. Right?
You're going to be doing this for the rest of your life.
yes. Until the fried rice is ready. So make sure that your resetting and your wok or your pan or whatever is nice and clean, wiped out. Okay. And then you're starting it with the same stage. You're heating it up, adding cold oil, and then you're going to start your process for your eggs, your rice, and your aromatics if you're using them.
Okay, great. So let's go there. Walk me through egg. Great. It sounds like egg is first.
Yeah. So this is the home approach to fried rice. I think that is the simplest for people. We can go into more details if you like about some of the different things that you can do. But basically what's happening, hot pan, add the oil has warmed up, and then you're going to pour in your beaten eggs. For me, I like a good amount of egg because I think egg is really important for the rice, and I'm looking at something like 3 large American eggs to about 4 cups of rice is sort of one. So therefore, if you're cooking for one person, you're looking at 2 cups of rice, 1 to 1.5-ish eggs beaten into that oil. That oil, you don't need to be generous with it, but you can't be scant with it. So usually it's a tablespoon or something like this. And you're pouring the egg in, eggs going in. It's very, very hot. It's going to bubble around the sides almost immediately. And your job is to move, and get it to scramble. And right before it's done cooking is when you have a choice. You either take that egg out if you're like, this is too much to handle. I need a little bit of time to think about what's going to happen next. Or you're like, okay, I'm ready. All my mise en place is good. Rice is going to go in. Right. So here's the good thing. If you add the rice in immediately, 3-4 seconds before that scrambled egg sets, you're going to get a little bit of that golden fried rice effect of some of that egg coating some of that rice, and you're going to get this nice eggy aroma. That's kind of the home approach to it, and that's what most Chinese parents and aunties and uncles are doing all over China. This is when they make fried rice. Scrambled egg almost finished, rice goes in, and then mix, and then the rest of the toppings go in first, any aromatics that haven't been activated, and so on and so forth. Now,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, are you going to go deeper into eggs, or are you going to go into something else?
I was going to go deeper into the eggs.
Well, please, by all means.
Yeah. Now that's a pretty good foolproof way of doing this. I think some people might look at this and say, hey, you're adding your rice into the egg mixture, and then you still have all this cooking to do to separate the grains of the rice, to season it, to add the toppings back in. Wouldn't the eggs overcook? If you mix it well enough, the curds or strands of egg should be so fine that cooking them harder is just going to produce more delicious brown eggy aroma. I'm not worried about like a perfectly set scrambled egg in this condition, in this circumstance. The one reason that you might take your egg out and then, do your rice and your aromatics on their own is that you do want that like soft egg texture, and you're basically just mixing in a scrambled egg into a fried rice. That is an option, but I think cooking it harder throughout the next couple, like 3, 4, 5 minutes that you're going to be doing this is totally fine. Now, one thing I've recently been doing that I think produces even more of this like toasty, nutty, caramelized, Maillard reaction brown egg flavor is, instead of beating my eggs before I add them to the wok, I've been frying them instead. And so I'm cracking these eggs directly into my wok, into my pan, a little bit of oil, and I'm just letting it sit like you're frying an egg hardcore until the sides are almost bubbling and they're about to get brown. But the egg yolks on the top haven't been touching that little like disgusting upper film of egg whites. It hasn't moved. And again, you're kind of hacking the golden fried rice thing. That's when you break open the egg yolks and then you add the rice and the top, and you just get this like breaking up of the egg yolks and the egg whites, but you get that crispy egg white flavor that egg yolks wouldn't really get. And so you get the best of both worlds. And yes, some, like fancy chefs would be like, oh, you're like, I can see in your fried rice, you have both whites and yolks and they're not mixed well together. I was like, well, that's kind of like the point. Right. Kind of interesting way to do it also.
That's smart. Yeah, I love that. That's really smart. So let me go back to, let's say you put your eggs in your pan. I want to talk a little bit more about like how you're thinking about the scramble, because there's a lot of different ways to scramble eggs. Is it like small curds, big curds? Yeah. It sounds like you're doing it over pretty high heat. Like is it almost like a fast scramble?
Yeah. My pan was ripping hot and smoking. And once I add the oil, it has come down in temperature just a little bit. This egg will set within 10 seconds.
Great. Okay, cool. So you're like push.
Like you could be mixing even.
Okay.
And so, I cook on a gas stove here in Shanghai, but on an electric stove, you might not get as much heat, which is why it's nice to use something like a cast iron that will hold on to that heat even when you add stuff. But yeah, I'm going to say 10 to 30 seconds, depending on what type of stove and what type of pan you're using.
Cool. Nice. Yeah. So you're moving it a lot. It's been so interesting. Like, I feel like since you first described the golden fried rice of like, you're kind of capturing the rice granules in the egg. It's so smart to brown the eggs like that and then like leave the raw yolks and then you still get the coverage around some of the rice. I like that. Okay. So do you feel good moving on to the aromatics at this point?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I guess at this point my mind would be like, oh my God, like this egg is going to brown too much or the rice is going to get overcooked. But it sounds like you're kind of at the very beginning of, you're going to cook raw aromatics at this point, basically, right?
For listeners who might have at this point looked up the Bon Appetit recipe for golden fried rice, this is different from that because I have since evolved since whenever 4 or 5 years ago when that thing came up. This differs from that recipe because I found that aromatics don't need to be activated for as long. And I actually like doing it now after the rice and the egg is dealt with. And so if you're going golden fried rice, the rice is already inside of the egg. If you're not going golden fried rice, the egg bit has been scrambled or fried and the rice has been introduced and it's mixed together and all these things. You're going to push this mixture of rice egg to the side and maybe add a little bit more oil if you think you need it, just to stop it from sticking. And that's when you add your aromatics. In a proper Chinese sort of approach, you would primarily rely on scallions. Scallions cook much faster than onions. Onions require a little bit more time, but onions are fine too. If you were to use onions, I would encourage people to dice them smaller than they think so that they cook more quickly. Onions, garlic, and ginger are the base sort of aromatics that you can use. But in my opinion, you don't actually need many of them. You could go with, in my opinion, you could go with just some onion or scallion kind of allium, and that would be sufficient as a base of flavor. In my opinion, these days, for me, because I have such access to great scallions constantly, I, at this stage, will introduce the chopped scallion whites, and then I'll keep the scallion greens to add later on in the cooking process to keep them nice and fresh and to keep their color. Whereas the egg whites will kind of pick up a little bit of color and soften and be nice and sweet and all these things. But basically, yes, you're pushing the rice egg mixture to the side, you're introducing your aromatics, let's say it's onion or scallion, garlic or ginger, and then you're mixing it all in again. Once they've picked up, kind of like seared a little bit on their own, then you're incorporating it. After this,
so they're not Are they like all the way tender, would you say? Or they've picked up a little color, they got some crunch to them?
They've got a little bit of crunch to them. When I talk about activating your aromatics, I just mean that you should be able to smell them. They should be fragrant, right? The oil is like encouraging these delicious flavor compounds to like rise into the air, and you can smell them in your nose. If you smell them in your nose, yes, by definition, the aromatic is activated and you're ready to go to the next step. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the aromatics are in, and then we still have to go down the golden path, which maybe we cook quicker, but your aromatics are in, your egg is in, your rice is in, you've got all of your protein and veg on the side. What's next?
So now is the time to season the rice, in my opinion. So this is just because we're still relatively, I guess we're like short of halfway through the cooking process. You want to season a little bit earlier because you want rice to have time to absorb that flavor. In my opinion, the best thing to do is salt, sugar, and MSG. Salt and sugar and MSG for fried rice, to me, is roughly a 2:1 ratio if you're using kosher salt.
Cool. Okay.
So my typical ratio is for every 2 cups of rice that I'm cooking, and knowing that there's egg in addition and toppings in addition and so on and so forth. For the 2 cups of rice, I'm using half a teaspoon of diamond kosher salt, which is the least salty kind by volume, and then a quarter teaspoon of sugar and a quarter teaspoon of MSG or chicken powder.
Chicken powder, I love that. Yeah. So are you actually measuring, or do you have like a pretty dialed in pinch at this point?
I'm in cookbook writing mode for yes, I am measuring, but a quarter teaspoon is basically like a fat pinch, and then
a two finger on one thumb pinch.
But if you have like big fingers, if you have like regular people fingers, it's like kind of more like 2 pinches kind of. But that ratio roughly is helpful because, the salt is there to encourage all the other flavors to come out. The sugar is there to balance some of that salt. Chinese cooking is great in the sense of balance because, when you add salt to a cupcake to make it taste sweeter, like Chinese people like to add a little bit of sugar to make the salty part saltier. Makes total sense. And the MSG is for that savoriness. Chicken powder, for a lot of people, is a little bit healthier, whatever. It's still made out of, I don't know what. It's made out of chickens, honestly, but the chickens go into a box and then out comes chicken powder.
Yeah, totally. Everybody knows what happens inside.
But chicken powder is great. And actually chicken powder is one of the foundational flavors of golden fried rice in a commercial setting, kind of like a screwed up oyakodon type of thing, where it's like cook the egg with the chicken, it comes from the same place, so the flavors match. That sort of, there's a little bit of myth there.
But, when you say chicken powder, are you referring to bouillon, or like what do you mean when you say?
Yeah, I'm referring to bouillon, but in Asian grocery stores, it's usually in granule form, which makes it easier to use.
Nice. Okay, so you season your rice 2:1 salt, sugar, MSG. Your ratio was half teaspoon of salt, quarter teaspoon of the other
2 cups of rice.
For 2 cups of rice.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Yeah,
so you're like tossing. It's seasoned with those things. What's next?
And then and as this is happening, right? And actually, whether or not you're going down the golden fried rice route, you're looking at the same thing. So at this point, the process is the same. The rice might still be a little bit clumpy, but the eggs are kind of incorporated. You're seasoned. What you're going to do is you're constantly going to be tossing and stirring, if you can toss. And you're going to use the back of your spatula to gently press any remaining clumps of rice into the pan itself. Now, if you look carefully, there are clumps of rice that want to come apart, and there are clumps of rice that are just glue. If it's glue, pick them out and take them out. You're never going to be able to fix them. If you can see individual distinct grains, when you're pressing into it, what you're doing is you're encouraging heat from the bottom of the pan to penetrate this clump of rice. And as any surface moisture begins to heat up and so on and so forth, it'll start to separate. Don't try to break up grains with like the front of your spatula or a fork or chopsticks or anything, just because you're doing an impossible thing. You're trying to like separate each individual grains of rice one by one. Instead, you should be using the heat and the temperature to encourage these clumps to come apart. And usually most of them will come apart.
Interesting. So you're isolating them and then pressing them into the surface, like flat, like squishing.
You're kind of like tossing, and then you're using the back of your spatula just to gently press them in. And you're not trying to squish them. You're just trying to encourage the heat to happen, and then you're going to toss a little bit more. And you primarily use this sort of like pressing motion to encourage these clumps to come apart.
Are you using a rubber spatula?
I like to, in a wok, we use metal spatulas, but like a wooden or rubber spatula will do too. Anything to press it in. One sort of side note caveat is that When people are excited about Chinese cooking, they love this sort of image of wok cooking where people are constantly tossing and, pulling and like looks at the big fire, super, super cool. But in the upper echelon of, 40 Michelin star like restaurants, Cantonese chefs actually insist that fried rice is not made by tossing and is made by stirring, because you're cooking at a relatively low temperature to the hardcore stir frying. I say relatively low because it's relative to their kitchens. In your home kitchen, you're probably ripping at maximum heat and you're like nowhere even close.
Yeah.
But for them, fried rice is a stir-fried dish with a spatula, with a flat spatula instead of like those like big Chinese ladles that you see. And so it is a very, in their opinion, a time intensive dish. Think about it, like most of these dishes are picked up in something like 1 to 2 minutes. Fried rice taking 4 or 5 minutes. It's a long, long time. And it requires this attention to detail of mixing and mixing. So in a way, I think a good fried rice can be made at home because you are going to be mixing and cooking for a longer amount of time. So anyway, so back to the what's happening in the fried rice. Your eggs are in. Rice is in, seasoning is in. The next thing after this is going to be your toppings. If your toppings have any sauce or juice on them, you kind of want to drain it because you don't want to introduce too much moisture to the fried rice. But you're going to add them to the fried rice. You're mixing it together. And you should do this once the rice is, I'm going to say, something like 90% separated. Like it's almost done finished cooking. Some visual cues. If you're going for golden fried rice, you'll see that the rice has turned from pale yellow to golden, not quite golden brown, but it will become brighter. When you cook eggs, they become a little bit more and more yellow. If you're not going for golden fried rice, you're looking for those individual grains of rice to start jumping, because that means that they are dry enough that they're, any excess moisture popping off the side of that grain is causing it to propel itself into the air. And so you'll see at the edges, like individual grains, like little orphan rice bits will like come to the side and they'll just like jump. And you're like, okay, like I'm at the right temperature. I'm at the right sort of like dryness. And once you see that individual distinct grain or that color change, you can introduce your toppings. The toppings don't need to be cooked into the rice. They just have to be kind of like mixed into the rice and warm together. Let the flavors mingle for 30 seconds and you're good to go. And that's the end of that fried rice.
Okay, interesting. So kind of zooming out here a little bit, like when we started the process, it sounded like you start by breaking up the rice with your hands, but you're inevitably still going to have clumps in your rice when you start. Right. And so the process of cooking the rice, which might take anywhere from, sounds like 4 to 6 minutes, is a process of slowly introducing heat and slowly breaking apart these grains as you're also incorporating aromatics and egg. But the cooking process, the heating, the stirring is an act like of breaking up the rice into individual grains. Like that's what's happening. Got it. Interesting.
Your main job for making fried rice is to make sure that the rice grains are distinct, and then timing the addition of the other ingredients not to interfere with you achieving that texture. So if you add toppings at the wrong time, it doesn't really matter because you're not really going to overcook anything, but you might introduce something that might get in the way of a perfectly textured fried rice. That's the general sort of overview. Yeah.
Even at the aromatic stage, there's still clumps.
Yeah, usually, especially if you're going golden fried rice and you're introducing raw egg into your rice mixture, by definition, that's moisture and it's going to feel a little bit more clumpy, but you're waiting for it to cook for it to separate. The heat is your best friend for like separating the grains of rice, not mechanical like breaking apart of those grains.
Interesting. That's worth $1 million just to know that. So before I want to dive in to get a little bit of the golden fried rice too, which I know we were going to do initially, but I got so excited. What about like sauce? Great question. Yeah, thank you.
Sauce in fried rice. Now we've already established that moisture is sort of the enemy to fried rice. That does not mean that moisture cannot be added to fried rice. I think for a long time, I like the purity of fried rice. I like that egg flavor, as you know. So I feel like any addition of other sauces tends to cover up the flavor of that fried rice. That said, if you add sauce in an intentional way and you build the flavor profiles around that sauce, you can achieve some pretty interesting and spectacular types of fried rice. Now, from the more traditional to the least traditional, the most traditional soy sauce fried rice is just soy sauce and eggs. For me, in around 2 cups of rice, right, that one person portion, you're looking at only 1 teaspoon of soy sauce. And then I reduce the salt level by half to 1/4 teaspoon. So 1 teaspoon of soy is very little.
Yes.
That's one. Number 2 is when you add it to the side of your pan and not to the rice itself. When you add it to the side of the pan, the heat of that pan is going to cause it to rapidly reduce, cause any sugars inside of that soy sauce to caramelize and give you that toasty flavor. And when you mix all that rice together, it becomes a very light brown. It'll be more brown than you expect, but just a little bit of brownness, and you get that sizzling caramelized sort of like soy sauce flavor, which I think is really nice for a very basic soy sauce plus egg fried rice.
So is this right before you serve it? Like last minute you put
this
in?
is the last thing that you do, basically.
Yeah, okay.
And usually if you have toppings in a fried rice like this, I would do it before the toppings go in, just because you want the sauce to be in the rice and not in the topping.
Got it. Okay, cool. Nice. That makes sense.
And then another one that's a Hong Kong favorite that's really important to us Hong Kong people and featured in my book is Western fried rice, which is basically ketchup fried rice. Ketchup on its own is sweet and sour and obviously delicious. We balance it out usually with a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, a little bit extra sugar, that sort of thing. That sauce, a tomato-y ketchup sauce, is mixed in a small bowl on the side. Same thing, pour it into the side of the wok, let those sugars caramelize for 2 seconds, and then you incorporate the rice into it. You have to be very measured about introducing something like ketchup because it's so wet, because you don't want to screw up the texture of the rice. So make sure your rice is at the right texture before you introduce something like ketchup.
Red texture being individualized grains.
Individualized grains. Yeah. And when you're adding moisture, know that the rice is, because of this introduced moisture, is going to want to clump again. So cook it a little bit more to cook it, like after it's mixed, let it cook for maybe another 30 seconds or a minute so that those flavors can meld, but also that you can preserve that sort of distinct texture.
Interesting. So it's ketchup, like also like a half teaspoon?
Yeah,
or?
Ketchup is like ketchup is maybe like half a tablespoon to 1 tablespoon. You need a little bit more for that, like tomato
and
flavor.
Worcestershire or sugar is what you're saying?
Worcestershire and sugar.
And sugar. Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah, for
the
Hong Kong version.
That sounds really good.
And then you can do ranch fried rice. That's the craziest one.
Oh, don't do it through me. What do you mean?
Like ranch is perfect because ranch is basically mayonnaise, like super high in fat, and like that fat is going to hit the pan. It's going to sizzle all those aromatics, those like dried parsley, all these delicious things
Beautiful.
inside of ranch. The onion powder, it's just going to all activate. So again, you're like adding maybe like less than a tablespoon of ranch or something.
Wow.
And you're just like plopping it on the side. Similar thing's going to happen. It's going to sizzle. It's going to go crazy. And then you add your rice in. You mix in all your like individual grains. It'll make sense. It'll taste like the thing. And because you cut it to the side of the pan, it's going to taste more like the thing than if you were just to add goop to your rice. So it really is like, you can do I've had family meals where we've had chefs make barbecue sauce fried rice. It can be any, like, if you, obviously now is the time when we should blow the doors open and remember that fried rice is not only a Chinese thing, but in like Southeast Asia, for example, like nasi goreng has like basically curry paste, so like aromatic pastes that could be added at this stage that would be activated in a little pool of oil on the side before the rice goes in or something like this. Even when you're looking at like, I love the like Latin American like arroz chaufa, arroz chaufa,
totally.
like all of that stuff is just, sometimes people will introduce things like spices or paste or whatever flavoring that you have. Now is the time to do it once you've like secured the texture of your rice. Like just activate that little sauce on the side, add those flavors, incorporate the rice back in, and then the toppings go in at the end.
Wow. You know, I didn't think you were going to say ranch. I honestly love that. I've never heard about that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love ranch. Maybe blue cheese.
Yeah, could be.
It could be. Wow, that is amazing. And honestly, so many things have blown my mind already. I feel like we should talk about golden fried rice. It sounds like there's a lot of similarities in process here. So the thing to kind of talk about is probably, well, I guess we haven't talked about like garnish. Which direction should we go?
Yeah. We can talk about the garnish first. Okay. So I think like I don't usually love too much like topping stuff that goes on top of stuff in Chinese food because that's not normally how it's served. So in this sense, a garnish is kind of something to like finish the cooking process with, even if it's not physically on top of the thing. By this I mean, let's say you have your scallion greens. I would mix that into the wok, into the pan, toss it all together, barely let it cook. You're basically off the heat now, and then serve it in a bowl or in a plate or something like that. That to me is just like the last final touch. These are things that you want to keep raw, and you want to keep them raw because of their freshness, their aromatics or otherwise, other than the obvious scallions type of thing, or let's say fried shallots or something. You can also look at things like salmon roe, like tobiko or proper salmon roe, you can look at things like, let's say you have chopped up basil or cilantro or something like this that you want to incorporate in the end. One popular Hong Kong topping is lettuce. So, cooked lettuce is weird for a lot of Westerners, but like shred the lettuce into fried rice. After you fold that rice over that lettuce, just let that lettuce wilt from the residual heat. Will give you a little bit of extra texture to it as well.
Cool.
A Taiwanese thing would be a cabbage towards the end of the cooking, sliced very, very thinly, but a little bit earlier than lettuce, because it does need a little bit more time to cook. But those sort of like end bright notes you might want to keep till the end.
Cool. Amazing. Okay, maybe we should go into the golden rice. So for the golden rice, like you have, I think you said 3 egg yolks to 4 cups of rice, which is like one egg yolk to 2 cups of rice.
3 to 4 type of thing.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
So the process is you have your rice, you're breaking it apart with your hands. Your egg yolk is inside of the bowl. Sorry, no. Your egg yolk is inside of your rice mixture, and you're breaking it up and you're incorporating all physically with your hands. And then you will go through a similar process where in your pan, hot pan, cold oil heats up, and then you would cook your egg whites on the side. Now, the egg whites, just because the egg whites are a little bit more delicate, I like to cook them and then take them out. You can cook the egg whites alone, or you can introduce a little bit more fat to the egg whites as you beat them before you pour it into your pan.
Oh, you beat the egg whites?
Yeah, because, you know, egg whites usually have a clump and then a watery bit, depending on how fresh they are. You kind of want to break out those clumps just because you want a little bit more finer of egg. You want finer egg white strands after you cook it. The other thing is, think about what you're doing when you're taking the egg yolk out of your egg whites is you're removing most of the fat from the egg whites.
Right.
And so what's left tends to like cook into something that's a bit gummy if it's overcooked. So I like to add a little bit of oil, neutral oil, into the egg whites and then beat them just to give it a little bit more of that fat for it to be nice and slippery and stuff. It can just be a little bit. And so hot pan, cold oil, egg whites go in, you're scrambling it. Once it hits the pan, you're instantly moving it around. Again, just like the beaten eggs. If you're waiting for it to barely set, it's 3 or 4 or 5 seconds away from it fully setting. Then you take it out, let the residual heat finish it. And then you go on with your rice and your aromatics. Your rice being the rice with the egg yolks and that sort of thing.
Right.
You cook it, individual distinct grains. You're seasoning it, mixing it all together. If you don't have any toppings, and I don't think golden fried rice really needs any of those other toppings other than the scallions, you'd bring the egg white back in. Toss, break up some of the egg. If it's starting to clump, make sure the rice is nice and distinct. Add your scallion greens, toss it, taste, adjust seasoning, and then goes out.
Okay, so would you ever fry the egg whites? Like you were talking about making the fried egg version of this, and you like let the egg whites just sit and get kind of on the edge of brown. Yeah. Would you ever do that with the egg whites, or you think it's better to scramble them?
In a golden fried rice context, you don't want any raw egg whites to envelop the grains of rice because you've already coated it in egg yolk. Coating it in a relatively wet, high moisture egg white will be counteractive to what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, cool. And when you go in with the golden rice, like, is it like, how much are you moving it around?
It's, I'm basically moving it constantly, especially with golden fried rice. It's going to want to clump in the beginning because you can imagine little bits of egg wanting to like stick to each other. So you're doing a lot of tossing if it's a pan that's tossable, but you're doing a lot of flipping, pressing, just to try to get it to become individually distinct. Every single time to this day, I make golden fried rice, like 30 seconds in, you think to yourself, I've screwed this up so bad. There's no way this is going to come apart. But if you trust the process and you trust the heat, it'll slowly, like those distinct grains, you can see the rice sort of like slowly break away from each other as the outside layer of egg yolks cook. It's a magical experience where it's so screwed. And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, it's working. And then when you eat it, you're like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever made in my whole life.
Wow. So what about the aromatics? Those are coming in just like, well, like, how do you know it's time for the aromatics basically when you're doing
in this case, the original recipe, I was cooking my onions, garlic, and ginger before I added the egg yolky rice, which is totally fine as well. Especially if you're using onion, you want that to cook alone and get it like softened before you add everything else.
Right.
But in these days, when I'm only using scallion, I am very happy to introduce thinly sliced scallions. As I said before, by pushing the egg and the eggy rice onto the side as it's kind of already distinct, activating the scallions on the side and then just incorporating it that way, so I don't have to take things out of the pan and put them back in. Okay,
and then the rest of it is basically, if you wanted to add the rest of the stuff, it's kind of the same process.
At the end, yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So here are some things that I've seen incorporated into fried rice that I wanted to ask you about. Broth.
Yeah. Weird. Let me think what the context would be.
I think I just like read that sometime. Like I think there's like a saucy fried rice variant that sometimes, or will have oyster sauce sometimes, maybe.
Oh, I see. So maybe, I'm not quite sure exactly what you're referring. I haven't seen it broth added to the cooking of the fried rice, but a popular fried rice is Hokkien fried rice or Fujian fried rice.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Fujian fried rice, like the more you study Hong Kong cuisine, and specifically chaan teng, like these Hong Kong diners, you'll realize that we have a whole host of dishes named after other cities or countries, and none of them are from that city or country. It's just like a Hong Kong imagination of it. And Hokkien is a great one because Fujianese fried rice, what it is it's individually distinct grains of fried rice, perfect, usually just egg on the bottom, and then a really sort of luxurious, luscious, thick brown oyster sauce based gravy over the top. And what's delicious about this is the combination of those individual distinct grains with the cohesiveness and graviness of the wet sauce over the top.
Yeah.
Now, the story about this is, actually it's downstairs from where I live in Hong Kong, is there used to be a Cantonese restaurant where the chef was making himself fried rice every day with leftover ingredients, and he realizes over time that this is really dry, so he wants to put a sauce on top of it. He makes like a classic, what in America people would call like a classic brown sauce, which is broth, oyster sauce, maybe some soy sauce, some sugar, and that sort of luscious, thick sauce. He spoons over the top. He's like, oh, this really works. Starts serving it to customers. Customers ask, what is this called? He's like, I'm Fujianese. He's like, Fujianese fried rice, which is kind of like the subversion of like the shrimp fried rice meme. Like, who's the shrimp that fried this? Like, which Fujianese guy made this? It's got nothing to do with Fujian, but like, you know. But usually, actually, these days, that topping, that gravy is studded with things like scallops and maybe crab and all these like luxurious kind of like ingredients. So it is a special type of fried rice, and it's very common in these Hong Kong diners, in these chaan teng. Other types of like sauce topped rice I really love from my childhood that you don't actually get very much anymore is, it's called yin yang fried rice. It's kind of like a wet, oftentimes you'll see like banquets do it, like, or like wedding banquets, that type of restaurant. And it's red and white sauce, and the red sauce is ketchup based, usually with like strips of pork, and then the white sauce is like cream of mushroom or cream of chicken based. Yeah, it's just like the thing out of the can, thicken a little bit, cornstarch, blah, blah, on top of like perfectly fried, usually golden fried rice or egg fried rice. So again, like golden fried rice is a great base for things like this. And when you look at things like baked pork chop over fried rice, same thing, golden fried rice on the bottom gives you this like perfume of eggy aroma that complements the robustness and the sweetness of the sauce that's over the top.
What about peas and carrots? I feel like that's something that a lot of people probably associate with.
In Hong Kong, we call it samsik dao, and the three colored beans. And modern Hong Kong people hate them because they're just so overplayed. The frozen pea, carrot, and corn combo. Right. But they are great. The reason why they're great in fried rice is because their texture is really nice. They have, in the way that sort of mirrors the rice, they've got a little bit of resistance, they got a little bit of bounce, but they have a little bit of softness as well. So I think that makes a lot of sense, but it is a little bit basic in my opinion.
Totally. If you were adding frozen veggies, would you cook those along with, would you cook them like your protein, and then you would cook your frozen vegetable, take it out, and then add it back in later?
If you're using those diced frozen vegetables, I actually just add them towards the end of that cooking process when the toppings would be reintroduced, so to speak, just because they're small enough that and they're cooked that you can just warm them through with the heat of the rice.
Cool. What about butter? What's it called? Benihana uses a lot of a huge scoop, like ice cream scoop of garlic
Japanese
butter.
fried rice, especially Japanese fried rice that you'll see in so-called sort of like yoshoku, like Western restaurants, or like Japanese Western restaurants, is usually the type of fried rice that goes underneath something like omurice, like omelets and things. And so they introduce a lot of things, like some people will say like the brown gravy, the demi-glace that they call, what they call demi-glace, or ketchup, or Worcestershire sauce, or like tonkotsu sauce, or something like that, like that sort of Western-ish fried rice through the Japanese lens. In that context, it makes a lot of sense to add butter. Butter, as always, for any stir fries at high heat, carries the risk of the milk solids in the middle, like burning. But usually, especially in the context of Japanese Western food, you're not really often cooking in woks. You're cooking in pans. And so you're never going to get to, if you're watching what you're doing, butter totally makes sense.
Cool. I have two more questions for you. What are some restaurants you would send people to have like supreme examples of fried rice?
Yeah. New York City. In New York City, Ping's is
Pings.
maybe, first of all, Ping's is maybe one of the best Chinese restaurants in the US. I have friends who grew up and live in Hong Kong, and when I see them in Hong Kong, they're like, "Oh, I heard you just went back to New York recently. How's Ping's?" Favorite restaurant in the world. I was like, we live in Hong Kong. we eat Chinese food every day. It's just called food here. But people think about that restaurant often.
They do like a half golden rice, right?
Yeah, they
Is
do
that what's going on?
a soft and crispy. I
Yes.
think is what they call it. And every time I ask them, how do you make the crispy rice? They never tell me. But it's basically kind of like fried golden crispy rice, like deep fried individual distinct grains of rice that they then stir fry to soft, fresh jasmine rice. And so that, the textural contrast is incredible. And the other ingredients that they add in it's egg whites in there. And I think there's a little bit of dry scallop also.
Right.
Just like in this case, that's a great example of the golden fried rice doesn't make sense because the ingredients are luxury and premium. And what they're looking for is a different type of texture. They want to show off like the crispy plus the soft at the same bite. That's probably the best fried rice in New York City.
Yeah, so good. Cool. Hong Kong, any Hong Kong shout outs or?
Well, fried rice in Hong Kong. Every Cantonese place is going to make a great fried rice. A general recommendation is if people are eating a lot of Sichuanese hot pot, like spicy hot pot, one of the underrated unsung heroes is actually the egg fried rice with soy sauce. The reason is because if it's a proper Sichuan hot pot place run by Sichuanese people and they're still cooking properly Sichuanese style, that rice is oftentimes pre-seasoned with a little bit of specific type of sweet soy sauce called donggu. This is a very deep cut, but that sweet soy sauce, they coat it in a similar way that you would golden fried rice with the egg yolks. And it just gives it a lot of like robust but gentle and subtle flavor of soy sauce flavor. And when it's paired with the egg as a stir fry, it's a really good base for your stomach before you eat all this like spicy food. And it kind of acts as a sponge to stop it feels like it acts like a sponge
Right.
to stop you from consuming and absorbing all of that like hot beef, spicy beef tallow that's going to wreck you for the next couple of days. But I used to be so against soy sauce fried rice because I thought the soy sauce got in the way. But now I know it's just the technique and the manner in which you introduce soy sauce tends to introduce a little bit too much moisture, and oftentimes it's just too much soy sauce. But a little bit of soy sauce is really nice. And the Sichuanese soy sauce egg fried rice is a special thing, even at the most casual of restaurants.
Sick. I love that. Okay, I guess my last question is there like what's the one thing you would want people listening to this to take away? Like if there's like a kind of like one line, like common mistake to avoid, the most important part, like what's the big takeaway for people?
The one takeaway is just make golden fried rice. It'll make your life so much easier. But I think the moisture is the enemy to fried rice. Fried rice is about controlling the moisture from all of your different ingredients to achieve the perfect texture of individually distinct grains of rice. That's the main thing. The rice texture is everything. And just think about all of the steps to achieve that li li fen ming, like individual grains of rice, those individual distinct grains of rice. That is your guiding force. And then everything else that you introduce on the sides needs to play towards that ideal texture. Texture first.
Absolutely beautiful. I love that. This has been absolutely wonderful. I loved listening to you talk about all this. It's like
thank you for having me.
So interesting, and thank you so much for being here.
You've been listening to Taste. I'm your host, Cody Reiss. Our music is by Justin Kohlberg of Moonrun, and our art is by Ben Bekele. You can find me on Instagram at Cody Reiss and the podcast at To Taste Podcast. And you can also find Lucas Sin on Instagram. He, I believe, has a cookbook coming out soon, and he's just a really interesting person to watch talk about food, so I definitely recommend it. Anyways, I think that's it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all soon. Or you'll be hearing from me soon.